fine.
You just give me the thumbs
I'll
up.
give you the thumbs up.
I'm like Pavlov's dog with the thumbs up.
If it works, stick with it.
Yep. All right, there we go. So welcome everyone to this. Sorry. There we go. Okay. Welcome everyone to this April 16th meeting of the IDA Governance Committee. And we have an agenda. We have privilege of the floor. I see no one in person or online to speak at privilege of the floor. So we will just move right on. The first item on our agenda is mission statement review. This is a mission statement that was adopted in 2018, and apparently it is our custom to review it periodically. I've distributed to all of you. Right, it's not really major. I just decided to take a look at this. And the main reason I changed it was that I think growing our local economy should be our first goal and not strengthening our tax base, although that is certainly a beneficial side effect. So your comments?
I was going to comment that the last sentence needs an Oxford comma, and you already took care of it, so thank you.
Very
right there. So do we vote on this? Is this all right with everyone?
I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
fine with us.
All right, so all in favor, I guess.
Do we need to put it on the floor first?
I don't know. Are we that formal?
It wouldn't hurt to have.
It wouldn't.
Yes.
Well, I'm
glad there's a rule abider in this group.
Scofflaw from way back. Jeff moves. Can I get a second? Thank you. All in favor? All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, now this next part is a little more complicated. This is our UTEP. I guess if we're going to review this, we need to put this on the floor as well. So would somebody like to move it? Shauna moves, Jeff seconds. Thank you. I have an initial question. I was a little confused on item number 3. It says, as of January 2008, the TCIDA no longer issues tax exempt bonds. Then it says TCIDA continues to have the authority to issue tax exempt bonds for other qualified projects. So I gather that what we're really saying in the highlighted text is that we're no longer issuing tax exempt bonds for dormitories. I mean, it's the two things don't.
The thing, Kelly, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think we tweaked that language just to clarify that, as of 2009, IDAs for some reason were stripped of their civic facility authority, which is the ability to issue tax exempt debt for not-for-profits, 501c3s. Therefore, we formed the Development Corp, as most IDAs did, to provide that service. The IDA still can issue tax exempt bonds for qualifying projects, just not 501c3. So affordable housing, small manufacturing, solid waste disposal, you still can do. So what I wanted to make clear is that I think it said the IDA no longer issues tax exempt bonds. I wanted to say no longer issues bonds for civic facilities. And if I didn't make that clear, we can noodle with that language, but it's
Well,
really.
why don't we just add that language after the TCIDA no longer issues tax exempt bonds for civic facilities?
Correct.
And that will remove the confusion.
Yeah, that'll do it.
I mean, everybody who's done this longer than I have probably understands what was going on here, but I think if a member of the public reads it, they should not be confused the way I was.
Yeah. That's my mistake.
All right, thank you. Okay, I guess the next change was the fee for offsite community solar. And I think we've discussed this at some length before.
Yes, we have. So I reviewed the fee structure with Russ and Stephen, and they let us know that we are the only IDA that currently has a fee of 0.5%. Everywhere else charges a full percent, which is in line with the rest of our standard projects. So That's
So why are we being so generous?
question.
If I recall, Deb, it was really, and I didn't have anything to do with it. It's a business decision that I think the board made to incentivize what was a statewide, program for alternative energy, and you wanted to,
Yeah.
attract those types of industries. So, I mean, and you can do whatever you want. You can charge whatever you want. I just, wanted Kelly and Rich and I had talked about it before his tenure was up. That, hey, look, you guys are the only one charging 50 basis points versus, maybe for the smaller scale ones anyway. So it's industry standard to charge that.
I would love to make a motion to bring that to 1.
Okay, I think we should have a fairly robust discussion about this. So what does everybody think about that? I mean, we're kind of getting to the point now where we're not expecting to get quite as many of these because the federal tax benefits are evaporate. So I'm kind of neutral on this.
I think that, to Russ's point, I think the market bears 1%, so I don't see a reason why 0.5%. So I don't think a 0.5% increase will affect the ability for these solar companies to build these, so.
And Deb, you're right. The solar alternative energy projects are probably going to come to a screeching halt until our friend at the helm disappears.
Oh, please, God, let that be soon.
I will reserve comment. And so, yeah, there'll probably be a slowdown, especially through 2028 on these types of projects. So I can't hurt to have it in there. And the board has the flexibility. If you get a project that comes in and says, well, wait a second, you did this for these guys in the past, and our economics show that we need this, or we can't do the project, the board can vary from that fee if it chooses to do so.
There's also within the commercial solar policy or community solar policy, the accelerators for prime active ag land and prime soil. So those are two things that can be considered as well when projects come before the board. So there's really 3 things that could be amended per project on a per project basis.
Realize I'm auditing class here, but is there a real life example where what would be the difference between 0.5% and a 1% gain? Like I saw the check for Yellow Barn yesterday. I'm not assuming that was 0.5% of total cost, but
Yellow Barn is utility scale, so that was on a much different, the way that fee structure was calculated was much different than the community solar projects. I'm trying to think of.
So community solar has a specific definition.
Yes, it's only up to 5 megawatt.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Carolyn,
Paramore? Yeah.
you probably wouldn't be able to pull off the top of your head what a 0.5% versus a 1% would be.
I'm trying to think of what.
Like a $17 million project or something?
Around there, between 17 and 20.
So it'd be 170,000.
Yeah, so 170,000 versus what, 85,000, something like that?
Yep.
That shouldn't kill a project.
Right.
And if it is.
And the only thing.
Curious, I mean, we talk large numbers, a 0.5%
That's right.
would be a lot.
Right, there may be one community solar project coming before the board. I checked in with Ryan at Nexamp about the one in the town of Ithaca. And if that does move forward, then he said that their plan is to bring it before the board. And then there might be a 60 megawatt, but that wouldn't fall under this policy. So that would have a host community agreement and that type of structure. So that's all that's in the pipeline right now. So just.
So I'm comfortable moving to the 1%.
Okay, Doug?
Yeah, unless there's something unique about Tompkins County that makes it more expensive to build solar. I know that's true for literally
Just
everything.
about everything.
Yeah, but at least it gives us the flexibility as a board, as
Yes.
future boards, deal with it, so.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, shall we vote? All in favor? That's unanimous, thank you.
Hey, Russ, can I ask the question just above that? So the nonprofit and affordable housing, so that's at 0.5%. Is that market right now, what you're seeing across the state as well?
No, it depends. If you have a deal where they're refunding existing debt, you know, most issuers will charge a half a point. If there's new money where they're building a new building and they're refunding, they'll charge the 1% on the new money piece and then the 50 basis points on the refunding component. So we just had this happen in Geneva for Hobart, where it was a large transaction where there was $30 million of new money and $60 million of refunding debt. They charged the half a point on the 60 and the full 1 point on the new money. So it is typical on refundings for the half a point, but I think on new money, it should be the full 1%.
We have any appetite to change that then, or talk about that as well?
Which one is this?
The
Above
affordable.
the both nonprofit and the affordable housing, we're at 0.5%, and my rest was just saying the market's 1% rating.
I think that I personally wouldn't be in favor of that, just because I think our need for affordable housing and not-for-profit projects is so acute. And it's such a difficult time getting them. I think if we got to a point where the IDA desperately needed the money, that might be different, but I don't think we do. And I think we ought to make it as affordable as possible. That's just my opinion. I'm happy to hear what everybody else has to say.
I would agree with that. Plus, housing projects are already precarious as it is.
Yeah. Shauna?
Yeah, I agree, but I also think there's the flip side of if we're gonna offer one of the best incentives in the state that I hope we've learned some lessons with some of the
Oh, yes.
existing projects, and I hope that we vet those and make sure that the supportive services are offered with those, because they really end up being taxing for our whole community if we don't vet them well enough.
I do think that the lesson that we should have learned from this latest fiasco is that if we're incentivizing a project that is centered on providing services, we write those services into the contract so that we don't have to wait for a code violation before we get on the developer's butt about non-compliance.
And that is in process with the housing committee.
Great. Thank you, Russ. That's good to know.
Yeah, and when you're referring to the most recent debacle, and I quote you, we can say this publicly. The supplemental default letter has been sent, and we made
Thank you for that.
of course, and we made it abundantly clear that there are provisions that are broad within our documents that they provide a safe project. And obviously the code violations are indicative that they're not doing that. So even if they cure all of those various code violations, they still have to establish that they are going to operate the facility on a going forward basis at a level that, the board agrees with. So let's stand by and see. It just went out yesterday, if I recall correctly. So let's stand by, see what their response is. And then of course, we'll bring it back to the board.
Right. Okay, so I don't know, do you want to move that we increase the percentage for not-for-profits and affordable housing?
I'm comfortable with what everyone else said, so.
Okay, great.
So the way that I have a process question. The way that our committees work here, we'll vote on the amended document and then it'll go to the full board.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, are there any other questions about these fees? Because then we can move on to discussions for subsequent meetings. And what items we might want to consider in the future. I guess we're not going to do those now, though.
Right, just open for discussion and see what avenue you want to go down with.
So you had process. So you've voted on the little things, but you do have a motion still open to approve the final, all the rest of the edits in here. So if you want to
Okay.
do that. So.
Oh, but first, there are some items, if you look under like section C, bullet 1, enhanced incentive
right?
small project, so changing from enhanced energy to the enhanced incentive,
Right.
because that policy was amended.
Broadened.
Yep. So just
Yeah.
highlighting that.
Okay. Donna, were you on the committee when we did that? I can't remember.
I think that was December.
Yeah. So we had an enhanced
Energy.
pilot specifically for energy. And the committee talked and the board vetted, we wanted to expand the enhancements for things that were needed in the community.
Right.
Like onsite childcare was.
Yeah.
So it's a broader enhancement policy.
That's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Does somebody want to put the full amended?
Isn't that on the floor?
Already
On
on
the floor.
The full one is on the floor? Okay. Well, then are we ready to vote? All in favor? Thank you all for keeping me on process. I seem to be having difficulties with that this morning. Okay, so does anybody want to propose items that we should be discussing in the future about this UTIM? And I don't know, Russ, are the changes that we want to make to the contracts for a supportive housing project, for example, is that something that should be in the UTEP, or is that something totally for the housing committee?
I think it doesn't need to be in your UTEP. It's really, UTEP is describing the 10,000 foot level, describing what type of projects you want to incentivize and how those incentives work. Whereas the operational covenants that we're going to be incorporating into, housing documents and maybe all documents going forward would really be something that would come from the committee at a broad level that, council is instructed to come up with language or, language about, a covenant as far as operations, and that would be in the obviously in the closing document. So the short answer is I don't think you need to have it as part of your UTEP.
Okay, great.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
So in the UTEP, we currently call out like the CTAP policy and also the IDA Lansing Town Center incentive zone. So if the housing committee decides to make changes with the overall view on housing, because right now it's only designated for those two areas, then would that come back to amending the UTEP as well?
I don't think so. That the housing policy or any policy is really just a policy. The UTEP is required by statute. And so long as you have a policy that you adhere to, it doesn't necessarily all need to be filtered into the UTEP.
Okay.
You're just having duplicative policies, if you will. So, they go hand in hand, obviously. And all the policies that you have, or most of them are voluntary, other than the UTEP. Your local labor and the housing policy, that's all stuff that you and other IDs are doing as a matter of practice and should be doing, but it doesn't need to all filter through your UTEP.
So I have another question. If we're dealing with something that falls under CTAP or the Lansing policy, does our housing policy, do our other, like, as you put it, voluntary policies overlay that? We're not prevented from following our policies just because something's in CTAP, right?
No, and I think I've said this in the past that you could provide a lot of flexibility within your policy to say, here's our policy, but the board at its discretion on a case-by-case basis can vary from that or
And I think
upon
we
certain
have that in-
criteria, or however you wanted to do it. So you're not pinned down by a policy that could impact a project negatively that you didn't intend to do so.
But we're not limited by,
Right.
yeah, okay. I just
Right.
wanted to be sure about that. I guess the other
Question.
I'm sorry?
I don't have a question as much as a comment. I wanted to, I heard some feedback the other day from one of our legislators from Lansing, and they had mentioned that there was some attention by you all to have meetings in, I believe, the town of Lansing and the village of Lansing. And I have to say, I for the first time ever, I'm happy to hear that those meetings are occurring, and they might have been occurring in the past, but there's always been such a focus on the city of Ithaca. That's been one of my main grievances of.
That was Kurt for representing IME.
No. I know.
Not the idea.
No. I get
Okay.
that, but they're kind of one and the same. And
No.
yeah. You know,
What are we talking about?
we could actually have more projects coming through the IDA if more attention is given to some of our outer areas. So anyway, I just want to say that I was happy to hear that some attention is being given to our rural areas, because that has not always been the case.
You know, I will say, you know, as part of this yellow barn there, I think we were pretty creative in terms of putting, I think the fund is $500,000 or something like that for Lansing and Groton. So hopefully they will take advantage of that and create some, at least bring some good projects to us. So.
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, I've never quite understood the fact that we can't go out and beat the bushes for projects. We got to wait to see what comes in the door. And I don't know how we balance those two approaches. But I think the big Kurt.
That,
As opposed to the little.
We got names.
hey, this is the first time it's called petite.
Bearded Kurt. Bearded Kurt. Big Kurt. That's so tiny.
That's what I heard.
Foreman is doing a lot more outreach to the wider community than his predecessor did. And I think that is definitely a positive thing.
Yeah.
There's definitely a focus on attraction to try to draw in more business, and that's definitely been a focus. So that, along with IDA policies, I think will be a good step forward for.
I think he also,
attraction.
if we're talking to IED now,
Yeah.
he also got the message from staff and from our partners that it's not just Ithaca.
Yeah.
That you need to get out there and go meet these folks where, I mean, you're the core about Ithaca, right? And it's real. And you go out to Dryden or Newfield or Groton, you know, they've got vibrant community centers, as witnessed by winning New York Forward Awards and doing a really good job of going through the public comment section, getting those in. So it's, yes, he's very receptive and is doing what he said he'd do.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I have heard nothing but really positive things from everybody around the community that have met with him. So that was a good hire. Thank you. I do have a question. I know that we're somewhat restrictive about retail and commercial projects. I wonder if we ought to consider adding something to the policy about hospitality. Because to my mind, hospitality is kind of in the same category as retail and commercial. You know, hotels and restaurants don't necessarily create the kind of jobs that we really want to see brought to the area. And I mean, maybe I'm the only one here that's concerned about that, but I'd be interested in hearing what people think.
So you're saying restricted language for hospitality?
Well,
Or-
I don't know if we need language. I mean, I guess maybe my inclination is that hotels ain't what we need. But I'm happy to hear what other people think.
I think my initial reaction would be, I'd hate to restrict that just because, you know, everyone always refers to the Marriott, right? That's the perfect example of that thing doesn't get built if we don't give incentives to that. And it was a postage stamp, and now we've got a nice hotel that's kind of a center of attraction there. So I think I would like to keep it open so we give the future board members, the ability to debate that. And if a hotel comes up and they say, we don't want that,
Okay,
then they have the ability. I would hate to restrict anything to come before us.
okay.
I feel like the well is drying up, and so I feel like right now, if anything, I would be in favor of kind of opening up parameters so that more industry can apply.
Okay,
Agree.
all right. Okay, then, anything else that we might want to put into this policy or discuss putting into this policy in the future?
Can I ask Russ? Russ, I just want to ask you in your review of the policy, if there was anything that you thought might be maybe a good avenue for change or something that you've seen. I know Monroe County recently redid theirs, and if it's focused on anything specific or if what the Tompkins County IDA has in place currently with the changes that have been recommended is a good move forward.
I think it's a great move forward. Provides you more flexibility and, there's, as you know better than do I, there's a housing need and you want to provide the ability to do good projects. And I think that with the changes that you're providing that opportunity. So I think, and it gives you enough flexibility where you can consider maybe a project that's a little out of the norm, but also provide the same protections that we hopefully don't have to deal with again in the future.
Thank you.
I think I have one concern, and I'm somewhat glad that we don't have public here because I'd probably be lynched after this meeting, but it's the heat pump requirement. And I know that we're a very green community, and that is certainly where we want to land. But I have many constituents that have gone the heat pump route, and with NYSEG charging what they're charging for electricity, have really fallen apart in hard times this winter because they can't afford their electrical bills. And, I know it says heat pump requirement, and then below it says are not required, and then it gives kind of the caveats. I guess I would ask if we're requiring heat pumps, and I know that the city has their own requirements, and I think the town does as well.
The same.
Yeah.
The city and the town are the same.
Yeah, we developed the green energy code together. So it's the same.
So anything outside of the city and the town is subject to our policy, but within the city and the town, just getting
It's the same.
I mean, we could state that as a preference rather than a requirement.
I think I would prefer to do that. And I understand that this could be going backwards, but I'm not convinced that heat pumps right now are the best route forward whenever we're looking at green energy.
Well, they're certainly preferred, but I take I mean, if we're looking at affordable housing and you build affordable housing and then the heating bills are unaffordable, you just kind of cut our legs off.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, what do other people think about this?
I'm pretty reluctant, although I feel you. I mean, I got one a couple of years ago. The price was astronomical. I make a good living, but it hurt. So it does impact construction costs. And yes, my electricity bills have been crazy, although, what do you call it? The ceiling helps a lot too. So I don't know. I'm a little reluctant, but I feel you. I'm empathetic.
Is this something that we might want to discuss? Well, see, you don't want to do it in public. Grow with stuff.
Deborah, can you bring up what we talked about before?
The governor is talking about rolling back CLCPA, right? So like you are in pumping, so to speak, to the extent that locals do come with it.
I mean, I wouldn't want to pass that out of committee. I would want the entire board to talk about it. Because it's a pretty controversial and impactful decision. I don't know what the process should be here, but Jeff keeps looking at me like I grew horns.
No.
Remember,
I mean, honestly, my thought is, and I think Shawna was the one who said it, we feel like we've got projects maybe drying up here. So it feels like the more flexibility we can put in our policies. And I understand the concept of why it was put in whatever, how many years ago, all right? That was the direction. You've gotten more information now and it may not be the right policy. So maybe it makes sense to go with more flexibility in these things to maybe lessen some costs and give people flexibility. Look, at the end of the day, if it's the right move, then the developer is going to do the right thing. You know, from a financial and you know, the right thing to do in terms of what makes sense for the project. So it feels like the more flexibility we can put in here instead of strict requirements, it may help our ability to attract more.
I think they also have hybrid systems. So the heat pumps, I think, are more effective for air conditioning. And then people are using traditional furnaces for the heat. And I
That's what
think,
we do.
yeah, I think that, and I wouldn't have known any of this, but we're looking at replacing my house. And so, and I've seen the numbers and I'm like, well, both of them are painful.
Yeah.
And so,
Home ownership is painful.
yeah.
You're here.
Well, and it reflects, you know, you got this affordability crisis here, you know, and which
Yes.
when this policy wasn't, we didn't have that, right? Maybe we had it, I don't know, but.
Well, it wasn't as acute as
Right,
this.
but now it is. And so it feels like, should we adjust? And we probably need to think about that.
So what does the committee think? Should we consider proposing this? Should we open it up to?
Well, Deb, remember when any committee, you know, you don't rule by committee.
No, I know that.
Right,
I mean-
right. But you know, any policy changes comes out of a committee, either recommending or not recommending to the full board, and board is at its discretion to either approve or not approve the proposed changes that come out of committee. So you're not, if the board as a whole doesn't like this change or other changes, you know, it would be discussed, presumably anyway.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
And I think, look, you know, we're not saying eliminating it. We're
No.
simply saying in J, we're going to recommend it, but not require it.
Requirement.
So I would be comfortable coming out, recommending that out of this committee and have a discussion at the board, but like we do with everything.
Okay. So do we want to put the UTEP back on the floor? Can we do that? See, my process is all the legislature and I'm still learning this process and I apologize for that. Do we want to put this back on the floor and consider changing this item J? Would somebody want to move that? Sean
I'll
moves,
second.
Jeff seconds. Okay, it's on the floor. Again. So
I read this, it's only one word that needs to change.
Yeah,
So if
requirement.
Pump requirement, heat pump preference
Mhm.
or recommendation.
no, you have to,
Well, there's like,
there's must use
Shall,
needs to be
yeah.
changed and shall, yeah. Thank you, Doug. So heat pump preference or preferred, how do you want to do that?
Heat pumps.
Oh, just heat pumps.
And then going to,
Oh, there you go. Yeah, must do.
Okay, that's a good
it
idea.
is recommended that,
It is recommended.
and then take out must use.
All right. The multifamily housing and mixed use projects use
Mhm.
heat pumps for space heating.
Pumps
Heat.
should.
Should either be, okay. You're way ahead of me, Kelly. Heat pumps should not be, okay, we'll just change the
The phrase, verbiage.
shalls to shoulds. All right. I think those are the only changes that need to be made.
Yeah.
So, more discussion or? Are we ready to vote on this? Okay, all in favor?
Okay.
didn't want to be a blocker.
You're a
As long as
principled person.
that was
Democracy.
good.
It gives you cover also.
Yeah.
It's up to the board, provided the minutes are not explicit.
No.
Dodson was the only holdout.
Dodson for president.
Please.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So moving on, this is just a discussion item. Some questions came up about, our recapture project. Because we talked about recapture in a couple of contexts recently.
I printed out the policy.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. I know we got burned on the recapture for
Welcome.
Arrowwood.
Arrowhead.
Arrowhead,
The
Arrowwood.
thingy up there.
I know.
That's the thing. Eric Getzman.
Yeah.
And so there were questions about, what happens even if we're successful at a recapture, the recaptured taxes go to the taxing authorities and not to the IDA. Are we just out of our, do we just eat our attorney's fees? And that's apparently not the case. And since Russ is here, I will turn this over to him so that he can explain it to everyone and we all understand.
Well, are there specific questions or highlights?
Well, I guess the concern was, and Shauna raised this question, and it's a good one. Is there something written into our contracts that makes it clear that if we're successful in recapture, we can also collect our attorney's fees?
Yes. The application and the documents, and we've talked about this, require any project to pay any and all costs, including legal fees incurred by the agency. And be those transaction fees at closing or a change in a law requiring you to do something with respect to a project, which requires legal or outside advice from professionals, insurance, all of that. And even if you get into a litigation matter where you're suing a project applicant, which may be imminent, they are technically required to pay that. And in fact, we have a project in Genesee County that is in litigation. It's been protracted and it's getting near settlement. And as a condition to settle, we're going to require that they pay the costs incurred by the agency. And at the end of the day, if you get into litigation with a party, those fees are harder to collect. But as Deb, you and I talked about with Kelly, Harris Beach would never say, oh, by the way, here's our bill on a lawsuit that we either prevailed on or didn't prevail on and couldn't collect the legal fees. We wouldn't do that. So it's really not, it's something that the board needs to think about probably relatively soon that, okay, with respect to two projects I can think of anyway, what do you want to do as after default if they challenge it? And that's something to think about it. And if there's cost associated with that, they are the responsibility of the project applicant. And if they're not collectible, then that's something that the board can say, hey, Russ, thanks for your help, and we would live with it. And it's never really been an issue for us.
Okay.
So I don't think it's you shouldn't be worried about it.
Okay.
If there's ever, like, for example, Arrowhead, there was some de minimis amount that was paid. And, we, Steve and I, and our team would never put time on a litigation matter. And if I had to bring in my litigation team, of course, I have to try to get their time covered or they're not going to do work for us going forward. But that's my problem, not yours.
Oh, that's kind of you, Russ.
Appreciate you.
So so obviously we should be very careful about where we seek recapture. One question I did have is if we decide, for example, we've got one situation where suing to recapture would probably be trying to get blood out of a stone, but we could certainly terminate the pilot. In a case like that, if they sue us, I assume the same reasoning applies.
Correct.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions about this for Russ?
Russ, let me ask you, in that situation, if someone sued us, would we could we require them to put some type of like bond or escrow
Well,
within an account to cover your fees?
You could ask for it. I highly doubt that someone that's gonna sue you is gonna say, oh, here's 10 grand as an escrow to pay your legal fees.
No, they would ask.
Here's
for that.
Yeah, I mean, that was my point. It's like, could we require, ask it of the court or put it into our document? Hey, if you
Sure.
sue us, then, you guys are required to put up an escrow for something like that.
Yeah,
We could certainly do that.
okay.
We could certainly do that. From a relationship standpoint, I just would think the IDA would want to think about putting into a document that's something to the effect that says, in the event that we get into any sort of litigation with you, by virtue of us commencing an action or you commencing an action, you're required to make a $10,000 escrow deposit to cover our legal fees. That just kind of starts off on the wrong foot, because hopefully
It's like a prenup.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's up to the board. And hopefully the situations that we're dealing with now, at the same time, two separate projects, those are going to be rare and few and far between. And historically, that has been the case with most of our IDA clients. Yes, you have issues. Yes, you're going to have a lawsuit from time to time that you're going to have to deal with. But do you want to start off a project with kind of like, well, if something goes bad, you got to give us 10 grand.
I get your point. I hear it. And I agree with you. I mean, to me, every situation is unique. So I'd hate to write something in that's,
And look,
really
just
tied to a lot.
just take it to face value and have comfort in that if we, as your council, ever get into a situation where we see something that is not collectible and it's adding up and it's becoming expensive, we would come to you and say, hey, here's where we are. We can continue down this path, but there may be some cost at a discounted rate that we need to get covered. And you could say nope, or you could say that's fine. Here's the cap. And fortunately, we have not had to do that, and I don't see that necessarily happening anytime soon. Hopefully, anyway. So I don't think it's something that this committee or the board should be overly concerned with.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it just came up because all of a sudden we find ourselves
Yes.
with two projects where things are not going well.
And the board's going to have, putting aside the costs and legal fees and that type of stuff, the board's going to have to make some tough decisions on the projects to which we're referring in the periphery here. So, but that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, is there anything else anybody wants to discuss today?
Can I just mention one last thing and then I'll.
Sure.
With respect to the one project, the letter has been sent out. I will be getting to Kelly and Deb. I'll copy you like I did with the first one, a draft letter. Once you two are signed off, I would ask that again, you get it to the board, have the board by email authorize us to send that, and then we will do the same thing.
Wait,
With the other project.
Yes.
Okay.
oh, I was.
Like, saying, I thought we already did that.
No, with the stereo, we did that. Yeah,
I don't want
the
that to
first
be our
one is.
Groundhog Day.
The first one is
See,
out,
like a
and
pet
you will be
project.
getting the first one is out, and you will be getting a draft of the second one
Okay,
at some point
Okay.
today, maybe tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
sounds good.
God, I'm so confused. Yeah.
Sorry.
All right. Thank you all. And thank you for putting up with my learning curve on this stuff. Thank God Jeff is here and Kelly. All righty, we are
All right.
adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Russ.
Thanks.
See you later.
Oxford comma Bay introduction.
I know.
Nice. I do too.
I am too.
Right?
Weather. Yeah.
I get so frustrated when the word every once in a while gets